All right. Hi, this is Pastor Josh from First Baptist of Queen. Thank you for joining us as we continue to read through God's Word every day and see the dynamic impact it can have on us when we ingest and digest what God has put there for us to have every day to change our lives for the better constantly. Well, today we're going to start in Exodus chapter 15, starting in verse 19. So remember, the Israelites have just been rescued, delivered from the Egyptians. The Israelites have just been rescued from the Egyptians by God. The Egyptian army was destroyed, and the Israelites sing this great song of praise as soon as this happened. But look at what happens next, verse 19. For when the horses of Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought back the waters of the sea upon them. But the people of Israel walked on dry ground in the midst of the sea. Then Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and dancing. And Miriam sang to them. So we get another great song of praise. Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. So remember, they originally wanted to leave Egypt and travel 3 days to worship the Lord in the wilderness. So they've gone 3 days into the wilderness. But they found no water. So difficulty arises. Now, the last time difficulty arose was when Egypt first left with their army to chase after Israel. Israel complained to Moses about God. So now here they are again, 3 days, and facing difficulty. And so what do? Verse 23. When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah, meaning bitter. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. So the Lord provided something for them to drink. They couldn't make it 3 days without complaining about what God has done to them, but really what God has done for them. There, the Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them, saying, "If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. I will protect you and take care of you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. So God brought them from a place where there was no water, and he provided sweet water. And then he took them to a place now that has 12 springs that are overwhelming amount of water everywhere. God provides in great abundance for them. Verse 16. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. So here they are complaining again. They can't make it but a few weeks without complaining about what God is doing, what Moses is doing. They are succumbing to an attention on their circumstance rather than an attention on the Lord, as honestly we so often still do today. And the people of Israel, verse 3, said to them, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. You brought us out here to kill us rather than take care of us. Even though they've seen God part the Red Sea, they've seen God made the water sweet, they've seen God provide the 12 springs of water, and yet still they do not have faith that God can provide for them every single day. Verse 4, Then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we, that you grumble against us? And Moses said, When the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him, what are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. They're saying you're not really complaining about us, you're complaining about what God is doing. So watch yourself. Verse 9, Then Moses said to Aaron, Say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel. Now you got to remember, God speaks to Moses, Moses speaks to Aaron, Aaron speaks to the people. That's the process here. Then Moses said to Aaron, Say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, Come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. So God's glory is showing itself in the cloud that's leading them in the wilderness. This would have been really an overwhelming sight, but even more than a sight, it would have been an overwhelming sensation to feel God's presence emanate from this cloud. Verse 11, And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, At twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. In the evening quail came up and covered the camp. And in the morning dew lay around the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, What is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. So they said, What is it? Or manna is what that means. What is it? Manna. And so they called it manna because they didn't know what it was. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, each one of you, as much as he can eat. You shall each take an omer, according to the number of persons that each of you has in his tent. So you gather this amount for each person you have. And the people of Israel did so. They gathered some more, some less. And when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. So there was enough for everybody. Whether you gathered a small amount, you had just a few people in your house, or you gathered a whole lot and you had a lot of people in your house, everybody had exactly the right amount. Verse 19. And Moses said to them, Let no one leave any of it over till the morning. But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. So they kept it for fear that they would not have any more. Remember, they're out there in the wilderness. They had been feeling as though they were starving, afraid of where their next meal would come. And so here God provides all this food. And Moses says, gather what you need for today. Do not store any for tomorrow, because God will provide tomorrow what you need. You just have to trust him. Well, some of the people relied on their fear of not having anything tomorrow rather than relying on the Lord. And in so doing, they kept over some of yesterday's manna to the next day, and it did just what he said. It bred worms and it began to stink. And Moses said, what are you doing? I told you God would provide. Let's see. Moses was angry with them. Verse 21. Morning by morning they gathered it, each as much as he could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. Now, verse 22. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers each. And when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is the day of solemn rest, or a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till the morning. So they laid it aside till the morning as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." So a Sabbath, a day of rest. Moses says you don't need to go gather that day, and God will supernaturally prevent worms from gathering in the manna, will supernaturally prevent it from stinking, and make it last through that day. Just as God provides it in the morning of each morning, the first 6 days, God will provide that last day, the manna you already have to suffice for day 7, which is, he says, a Sabbath, a day of rest and worship. Verse 27, on the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. So again, people were doubting what God could do for fear that they would not have any. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he gives you bread for 2 days. Remain each of you in his place. Let no one go out of his place on the 7th day." So the people rested on the 7th day. Now the house of Israel called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. So it was sweet. Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Let an omer of it be kept throughout your generations, so that they may see bread with which I fed you in the wilderness, when I brought you out of the land of Egypt." And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it and place it before the Lord to be kept throughout your generations." So God is going to not only provide the manna every day, and then on the 7th day provide the manna double on the 6th day to last the 7th day. God is going to allow this manna they put in this jar to last forever, so everybody can observe and remember the Lord's provision. Verse 34, as the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron placed it before the testimony to be kept. The people of Israel ate the manna 40 years, till they came to a habitable land. They ate the manna till they came to the border of the land of Canaan. An omer is a 10th part of an ephah, just as context. I know you all use an ephah every day when you're baking in your house, but this is an ancient way to measure. Chapter 17. All the congregation of the people of Israel moved on from the wilderness of Sin by stages according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. So again, they're in this plight. They had no water once. God provided the water. They had no food. God provided the food, both bread and meat. It says the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." So again, complaining to Moses, doubting the Lord's provision. And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." See, the people seem to have a common complaint. When things get difficult, they wish to go back to Egypt, forgetting the fact they were slaves and beaten and subjected to terrible conditions. But they forget the bad when they're in the midst of a situation they don't understand now. Again, something we all still do as well. Verse 5. And the Lord said to Moses, "Pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, and the people will drink." And Moses did so in sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the name of the place Massah. That means testing. And Meribah, which means quarreling. Because of the quarreling of the people of Israel, and because they tested the Lord by saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Doubting God's presence simply because they didn't have everything they thought that they needed when they thought they needed it. When in reality, they just needed to trust that the Lord would give them everything that they needed. Let's go over to Matthew chapter 22. And again, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son, and sent his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding feast. but they would not come. Again he sent other servants, saying, Tell those who are invited, See, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast. But they paid no attention and went off, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized his servants, treated them shamefully, and killed them. The king was angry, and he sent his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, The wedding feast is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main roads and invite to the wedding feast as many as you can find. And those servants went out into the roads and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad, so the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there was a man who had no wedding garment. And he said to him, Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. The wedding garment is like a cover charge that shows you're prepared to come in. This is symbolic of being prepared for heaven, believing in Jesus, the gospel, to get into heaven. And so the images, since those who were given the message of the blessing for the world that would come to the world, the Israelites, the Jews, and they rejected it, then Jesus came and invited the whole world to come in. But anybody who would try to come in without believing the gospel alone will find themselves unable to come in. Verse 13. Then the king said to his attendants, Bind him hand and foot and cast him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. Verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in his words. They're trying to trick Jesus again. Not that they've tricked him before, but they've tried before many times. And they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians. Herodians were followers of Herod. They were of the political party that Herod was a part of. And typically they did not get along with these Pharisees and their group. But because they have a common enemy in Jesus, these guys are working together. Saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully. And you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? So trying to get Jesus in trouble, right? Is it lawful to pay taxes? You're supposed to follow God alone. What about paying taxes to Caesar? If he says, don't pay taxes, then the Romans will get mad. If he says, yeah, you got to pay taxes, then the religious people will get mad because they hate Rome. But Jesus, verse 18, aware of their malice, said, Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax. And they brought him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, Whose likeness and inscription is this? They said, Caesar's. Then he said to them, Therefore render to Caesar things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And when they heard it, they marveled, and they left him and went away. He says, give Caesar whatever Caesar, Caesar wants money. Well, that's his money. It's got his face on it. Fine. But give God what is God's and the things that belong to him in every way, in every manner, in every opportunity. Verse 23. The same day Sadducees came to him who say that there is no resurrection. And they asked him a question, saying, Teacher, Moses said if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Speaking of an Old Testament law to make sure, to ensure that a man's family name is carried on and doesn't die out so that no individual Israelite tribe gets too small. And so they're creating this hypothetical situation to try to get Jesus in trouble. They said, Now there were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died, having no offspring, left his wife to his brother. So too the second and the third, down to the 7th. After them all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, of the 7, whose wife will she be? For they all had her. So they're asking about the resurrection of the dead when they themselves don't believe in the resurrection of the dead. And so Jesus knows their hypocrisy. And so he's going to answer the question in response to their hypocrisy, not necessarily in response to the specifics of the question. Verse 29, But Jesus answered them, You are wrong because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. You guys are completely misunderstanding the Word. For in the resurrection they will neither marry nor be given in marriage, nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was said to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. And when the crowd heard it, they were astonished at his teaching. So he's telling these guys there is resurrection from the dead. And heaven is going to be unlike anything you currently know in your present context. So pay attention to God and not your made up hypothetical situations. Psalm 27 of David, verse 1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? So if I keep my eyes on the Lord, there's nothing in this world that I have to fear. There's nothing in this world that can best me because I've got my attention fixed on Him. Verse 2. When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh, my adversaries and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war arise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing have I asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in His temple. For He will hide me in His shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of His tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in His tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to the Lord. So he's saying, I want to always be in God's presence, and I will praise constantly when I fix my attention on Him. Proverbs chapter 6, starting in verse 20. My son, keep your father's commandment, and forsake not your mother's teaching. Pay attention to what your parents taught you in wisdom. Bind those things, bind them on your heart always, tie them around your neck. When you walk, they will lead you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. When you awake, they will talk with you. For the commandment is a lamp and the teaching a light, and the reproofs of discipline are the way of life, to preserve you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress. Do not desire her beauty in your heart, and do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. For the price of a prostitute is only a loaf of bread, but a married woman hunts down a precious life. Think long term. Think God providing a spouse, he says, is worth a life, far more than these temporary temptations that you might fall into. So pay attention. Pay attention to wisdom that comes from the Lord. Pay attention to self-discipline that is a fruit of the Spirit. And God will provide what you need when you need it with your attention on Him rather than on the temporary and the momentary, because that will only lead to ruin. So thank you for joining us as we continue to journey through God's Word every single day. I hope you will come back tomorrow. If you missed any of them, you can see all of these daily Bible readings on our YouTube channel under the podcast tab. They're listed there, daily Bible readings, and you can see them, all of them there, all through up to today. And I'll hope to catch you tomorrow.